Jesus. Can you explain the deal with Jesus? Why do demons flee in his name specifically? I grew up a Christian and am still scared. I'm being deceived by Satan. Help me find peace. What did Jesus mean by the only way to the Father through me?
Okay, you really want this? Oh my god, this is fun. Okay, I'm going to sum this up for you in a way that you can understand it in like 30 seconds, I hope. No, I'm going to take longer than that, but here. Christ consciousness, Christ was not a person. This is what we have to understand. Christ consciousness was a huge group consciousness. Now, what you're calling Jesus, which is the person that the Christ consciousness funneled itself through as a channel, basically, was just the first person to bring Christ consciousness down to the planet. That's all that person was. Christ consciousness, which is the most important thing to understand because it is making a massive resurgence at this time on the planet, is very simple. It is choice. I literally just want you to take that word, write it down. It is choice. When you're talking about Christ, you're talking about free will, which is what choice is all about. Versus Luciferian consciousness, which is determinism. Now, what's really, really important for you, right, to understand is that there is nothing inherently evil about determinism. Now, determinism is the opposite of choice. It's action-reaction, and there's nothing you can do about it, right? So there's nothing inherently wrong about determinism. It was a thought within the mind of God. Determinism was a thought within the mind of God, and so is the concept of choice. Now, the reason why it's so important to decide to be part of Christ consciousness is because it's a choice. It's to say, I choose free will, right? If you exercise your choice, free will, you are in alignment with Christ consciousness. Now, here's where things get a little shady, right? To the degree that you are unconscious, you often are actually operating from a space of determinism. This is what any unconscious pattern is about. I feel anger, so I punch someone. Do you see there's no choice? It's determinism. It's action-reaction. We could say in any one of these circumstances that we are aligning with Luciferian consciousness, that we are doing a deal with the devil, or XYZ. But I feel like thinking in this way is very limited, and it's very low consciousness. It's very human. We have to understand things in concrete ways, but it is literally the kindergarten level understanding of this concept. If you want to align with free will and with Jesus, basically, just make choices. Make it a choice when you get triggered to punch somebody or not. Even if you're in a choice space of I choose to punch them, that's actually part of Christ consciousness. Isn't that crazy? But as you become more and more conscious, obviously your choices are going to be in favor of other people instead of against them. As your consciousness increases, you start to recognize every being as part of thyself. And so obviously I can't punch you or hurt you without hurting myself, which is what makes the choices at that point so in alignment with the rest of the life on planet Earth and beyond versus out of alignment. The reason why demons, determinism, are polarized or flee at Jesus' name is because the frequency of Christ consciousness is choice. Determinism and choice are polar opposites. They are not a vibrational match. They repel each other naturally. So that's your answer there. Was there anything else attached to that answer that I didn't answer? Or that question that I didn't answer? You don't remember?
I feel like that was good.
Here's something I need to tell you as a fellow previous Christian. I wasn't previously Christian, but as a previous Christian, or somebody who's born Christian, or even who still identifies as Christian, right? Fear, the frequency of fear, is a polarizing vibration. It is the exact opposite of love. Most people think hate is the opposite of love. It's actually fear. To love is to take something as thyself. To fear is to push something away from yourself. So Christ, the ultimate choice, basically, that Christ was teaching about. Christ's consciousness is all about choice. The ultimate choice is the choice to love, which is to take something as part of thyself. If you're in a state of fear, and this is my major issue with Christians in general, okay? Christians in general, they love to propagate fear. Fear the devil, fear demons, fear people who XYZ, at the same time as talking about love. And it is a complete contradiction. So the more Christian you are, ironically, the more capable you are of taking other things as thyself, including demons, including that which you want to push away from yourself. And this is the ultimate teaching of Christ that is coming back, thank God, now in this day and age, as opposed to what has been taught for thousands of years by disciples who didn't understand a freaking thing that Jesus said. So there's my spiel.
A couple people more interested in this this question. They want you to expand on this in regards to victimhood and self-sacrifice.
Okay, well, I don't...
Those are two large questions in themselves.
Yeah, I don't know how to... I would love to talk about this, I just don't know how to, encapsulate that,
Are they related? Victimhood and self-sacrifice?
Alright, I need to tell you guys something. You ready?
Victimhood and fear.
The story that you have heard about Jesus and the Bible itself was written by disciples. Now, this is something that is really, really freaking important to understand. Several of the disciples, they made a choice because of the time period that they were growing up, or basically raised in and teaching in. At the time, Judaism was the common consciousness that was available. Now, in Jewish culture, there was prophecies about the people who would come to lead the religion into the future. Now, these disciples knew that in order to get Jesus accepted as a disciple, they would have to operate within the teachings of of Judaism, right? So several of them that went off to write their different accounts of what Jesus was teaching, which, by the way, if you read these different accounts, according to Luke, according to St. Matthew, according to whatever, it's so very different. Their interpretation is so different because of what they wanted to gain and because of their own personal biases and filters. But something that we have to get here is that it was prophesied in Judaism that there would be certain ways that you would be able to identify the next great leader of the church. One of those was that these three kings from the, whatever place would know that this person was born based on the star, and they would follow them. So the stories that you have heard about Christ and the things that Christ said, half of it is complete BS. It's what the disciples said in order to get Jesus to be accepted in a culture that was radically opposing him. They were basically trying to position him as the next leader to a group that wouldn't say yes to him. And so half the stuff you've heard that he said is not even said by him. That has to be understood because so much of even the story of Jesus' death is fabrication for the sake of getting those people at that time to accept him at all. And the concept of self-sacrifice was woven into the Jewish culture like I cannot even tell you. I cannot tell you. So it really frustrates me to have an accurate conversation about Christ when we aren't understanding the psychology of the people who existed at that time. I must say that because everybody wants to talk about... the reason I got all off on that subject is because of this concept of self-sacrifice, right? Christ, right, coming from choice consciousness, coming from this incredibly enlightened space, understood that there is no such thing as other, right? He understood this. This is a person who understood that the very person nailing him to the cross, so to speak, was him. He understood the concept. So there was not this atmosphere of, I will do this to bleed myself of sin, to rid all people of sin. It wasn't this huge martyrdom complex that people are making this out to be. What happened here is that besides that being a huge part of Jewish culture consciousness, is that human society tends to propagate the kind of human behavior that benefits society. That's what it does, right? So it doesn't benefit us for people to be fighting, so let's teach against that. It doesn't benefit us right now, thanks to property ownership, for us to be having sex with anybody we want to have sex with, because this guy has to have that woman to have that child who inherits my land, right? So property ownership changed the way that we as human beings structure our concept of morality. So often the idea of morality has nothing to do with universal objective truth. It has everything to do with the way that we want to keep control in our social structures. And what is an issue for me is that we are still holding, religion basically is holding together government. The government's the one that decides what we need our social hierarchy to look like and social order to look like. And that social order is still in place from thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years ago. It was dysfunctional to begin with. We are way beyond it. It is time to move beyond it. Jesus was trying to get people to move beyond it. Half the people who were listening to him didn't understand what the hell that meant. Now, I have to tell you this. If I have people who live with me every day, right? I have people who live with me every day they see me. Every day I teach them. And if they were responsible for writing down my teachings, they'd completely mess it up. Completely. Because the way that their consciousness is structured is not high enough right now to grasp those concepts. It's going to go through the filter of their current consciousness. So you've got what you've got with things like the Bible and much of what you've learned about Christ. This is why I really want people to be able to tap into Christ consciousness themselves, right? So you have that access to Christ. Is because the filter, right, that this Christ consciousness was coming from and through originally, it's like caveman type consciousness, right? It's real serious to understand that, because half the people are writing, these things like the Bible, and it's not okay to wear two different types of cloth, for example. That has nothing to do with what Christ ever said. He didn't come down to the people and was like preaching love and then said, actually, it's okay to kill some woman if, she has sex with a neighbor. Like that is not something that was ever said. That is part of culture that was woven into that book. So I get really frustrated when people ask me questions about this whole time period and consciousness because of things like that. It's almost like you have to separate out the chaff, which was added and filtered, from the purity of what came in as Christ consciousness. Can you tell I'm passionate about this at all? Oh, this is another thing to understand too. Can I just do one more thing? Before we go to the next question. Christ was not an enemy to Luciferian consciousness. Actually, he didn't even know Luciferian consciousness to begin with. But let's pretend he did, because what Christians have set this up as is Christ versus the devil, right? That is not how Christ would think. Christ is the kind of consciousness because it's free will, and free will is basically the choice to love. There is no greater choice than to love one's opposite, or to love hate, or to love, whatever other vibration it is, because in the loving of it, you bring it closer to yourself. So if Christ was a person alive today and Lucifer was a person alive today, Christ would make a practice of loving Lucifer. That's the truth.
Okay, let's change the topic a bit.
Why?
I don't know, that was awesome, but...
Is everyone heated now?